Our first introduction of a PowerPoint for what we are talking about. So I'm pretty excited. This is going to be our fun stuff where you guys get to talk Hamilton the whole time. All right, so we're going to talk about the Federalist period. So, taking a look, we are going to analyze the Federalist period 1789 to 1800. We're going to talk about basically the Washington presidency today, and kind of a little bit of the cabinet battle. Don't want to carry it on too much longer than that. So, issues facing the nation. Basically, the Constitution's created, like we've talked about multiple times in class. Two business orders of business facing it. The first one was you had to give the Bill of Rights that you promised all the states that you would include the minute Congress was in session. That is done, as we've talked about before, and we need to elect a president of the United States. Other issues are we need to create some sort of judicial system, especially the Supreme Court. It's outlined but never actually created. And get the American economy on track. So what we notice when we talk about this is the lyrics to Hamilton, where you have what we call non-stop. And I know you guys like singing that song and kind of going through. And so when you go all the way down, we won't start talking about it until we're past the Federalist Papers because the Constitution's already been passed. And we get to the Washington saying, so they're asking me to lead. I'm doing the best I can to get the people that I need. I'm asking you to be my right-hand man. So Alexander Hamilton asks, am I going to be in charge of the Treasury Department, the State Department? Again, Hamilton's mind, money, everything like that. He's been a clerk. He knows kind of the economy. That's his system. And so he is going to run the Treasury Department. And he kind of looks around and gets ready to go. And that's where he takes over control. Now, again, Jefferson is going to lead the become Secretary of State. Again, a song called "What Did I Miss" is classic in that sense, where he comes back. Madison again arranges the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. We've talked about that. You guys have studied them, so we're gonna move on from there. Again, Washington's thought to be a unanimous pick for president, and he actually is. Reminder that the Electoral College basically takes everybody gets 2 votes. It doesn't matter what order they're in. You just vote for 2 people. Person who gets first gets the presidency. Person who gets second gets the vice presidency. So again, Washington wins. He gets every single electoral vote possible, and Adams gets the second place, becomes the runner-up and the vice president. Washington knows that he is going to set a precedent for the office of the presidency. He is going to establish the norms, what presidents do, and things like that. So while Congress is like arguing over what departments should exist and things like that, they basically come up with 3 departments. They come up with the Department of State, the Department of the Treasury, and the Department of War. Again, Secretary of State or Department of State is handling any affairs between the states, along with any affairs of foreign countries. The Treasury, where our money is, and what the handlings of taxation, things like that, on the American people, and Secretary of War, which will later be changed to the Secretary of Defense, handles all military aspects. So again, these 3 people, Jefferson, Hamilton, and Henry Knox, will advise the president. There's another position that's actually not mentioned on here, and that's the Attorney General. That's Edmund Randolph, and he basically handles all legal aspects of the United States. So he handles anything that's like if any suits brought against the United States or anything like that. He is the top official on that. So Congress creates a court system. Again, the Constitution only mentions the Supreme Court. It doesn't say that you're going to have this national system of courts, but it does say that Congress has the authority to establish a court system. So Congress passes the Judiciary Act of 1789, establishes the Supreme Court that would rule on the constitutionality of state court decisions. So again, originally the Supreme Court was just going to hold, like, if there was problems between the states or anything like that. That authority actually gets expanded almost immediately under John Marshall will become the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he will expand it. On a side note, I've been listening to a podcast on constitutional law. It's absolutely fascinating, and you guys can ask me questions about that later when we have our meeting on Thursday. But this will create a federal court system, 13 district courts, 13 states, right? Makes the most sense. And then 3 circuit courts of appeals. So basically clumping the states into 3 sections where you can have an appeals court. Um, Hopefully no questions on that. I'm going to make a questions thread on our history page. So if you guys have questions or anything like that, you're more than welcome to ask me, and I will do my best to get back to them as soon as possible. Okay, so our next one is going to be the struggling American economy. This is where we're going to start getting our Hamilton, Jefferson lyrics. So Hamilton is given the task of rebuilding the American economy, which, again, with no taxation of the Articles of Confederation, was a huge problem. So Hamilton's programs are going to create a very powerful federal government. Washington's actually going to support all of the Hamilton's programs, which is why they're going to get instituted. Jefferson, however, is going to oppose all of them. And Hamilton Jefferson debate is going to basically consume politics for the next decade. And again, like you see in the lyrics for Hamilton Cabinet Battle number 1, Jefferson basically comes onto the floor. The famous lines are, but Hamilton forgets his plan would have the government assume states' debts. Now place your bets as to who that benefits, the very seat of government while Hamilton sits. Again, Hamilton wants to consolidate all the state debt, which is kind of a big thing at the time. And so he is going to basically ask that the United States pays off its own debt, but then to ensure that we look good and that states can then hold out, he wants the United States to absorb the other $22 million of state debt, just so it's all lumped into one so it can be paid off. Well, again, like Thomas Jefferson says in the rap battle, Virginia has all their debts paid off. Why should they take on the burden of paying for states like New York and Massachusetts and things like that? And it's going to be a huge debate. So again, the plan is to assume all the debts is a volatile issue. Virginia's already paid it off, yet some states like Massachusetts still have large amounts. In order to get the agreement of the plan, we're going to get the trade-off, which is the room where it happened. So again, we talk about it. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Oh yeah. So an immigrant decisions are happening over dinner. 2 Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room, diametrically opposed foes. They emerge with a compromise, having opened doors that were previously closed. Bros. The immigrant emerges with unprecedented financial power, a system that he can shape however he wants. The Virginians emerge with the nation's capital, and here's the pièce de résistance, is no one else was in the room where it happened. And again, this is actually a very true thing. We don't have really any record of how that went down. But as you know, in the end of the song, one of the biggest things was that Hamilton got more than what he gave up. And that's really important here, is that the financial system that Hamilton actually sets up is way more important than holding the nation's capital. Yeah, there's some prestige with that, but what's interesting is that they won't actually get to use any of that prestige, um, because eventually Maryland and Virginia will both give up land, and the Washington D.C. is created, which will never actually be in a state. So here's a big problem. So when this starts to go through and it's found out that the states are actually going to get their debt relieved, and go into a national debt where the national debt will be paid off, this is where we start to see some sectionalism, so splits between the North and the South. And what basically happens is the North, like business owners, realize that they can go down and buy up what we call war bonds. And so war bonds are something that the government passes out or offers people to buy with the intent that they'll pay them back with interest. So the government will get money now for the war, and then the people will make money on them later. However, because of the Articles of Confederation and the system of government that doesn't allow taxation, these war bonds are basically useless. And so people in the North go up and buy up as many war bonds as they can for very, very cheap, knowing that they're going to make a ton of money when it comes back. And this is the first time where we start seeing that when this goes through, that Southerners and frontiersmen, so people in the West, are like, whoa, 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 like we just kind of got taken for a ride. We needed money badly, and these people took advantage of us. Also, Hamilton's going to pass a small tariff. Again, you can see it's 8%. He places a tax on whiskey, and this is an excise tax. So this is a tax on the production and sale of whiskey. Well, here's the biggest problem is that Western farmers, so people on the western side of the Appalachian Mountains, they grow these massive amounts of crops and things like that, and they want to send them to port. Well, they can't because it's very expensive to send your bulky like wheat crop across. So one of the things they'll do is they'll actually turn their wheat into whiskey and bottle it and then send it across to sell it. And that's a more cost efficient method of getting your crop to port. Well, the problem is they see this as a direct attack on them. And it is considerably high, as you can see. It's 7 cents per gallon of whiskey. And again, you got to remember that cents back in the day is a lot more than what we would think of 7 cents today. And so we actually see whiskey become this taxable income. And so this is passed in 1791. In 1793, they actually drop it off and say, hey, like, we're going to lower the amount that's taxed. And most farmers are like, totally fine, no biggie. The problem comes when there's actually I'm going to see if there's a slide on this. I don't. Oh, there it is. Yep, the Whiskey Rebellion. So the problem is in 1794 that a group of farmers in Pennsylvania actually rebel against this, and they have an open rebellion, and they start tarring and feathering tax agents and destroying courthouses. And what's fascinating here is for the first time and only time in American history, Washington, with the encouragement of Hamilton, actually gets around 13 to 15,000 militia troops, and he leads them to Western Pennsylvania to fight. It's the only time a sitting president has actually led troops in battle. And the Whiskey Rebellion basically kind of like falters. What happens is many people around the nation see it's like, okay, the government's serious. We don't just get to rebel every single time we don't like something. Again, Articles of Confederation had failed to stop Shays' rebellion, right? It took the wealthy people in Boston to put down Shays. But however, people like Jefferson view this as this is Britain all over again, right? Using that military force to put down people's opposition to the government. And so that's going to be a huge issue. Scrolling back up, you can see that we have another one of Hamilton's programs is he wants to establish what we call a national bank. And he wants an institution in which the government has a place to put its money. And it would be a private institution, but the government would actually hold the most stock in it. So they would have complete control over the bank. It would be used to promote growth of the economy. The government could hold their excess money there, and it would have the right to print and regulate paper money. Again, paper money at the time right now, especially what we called continentals back in the day, are completely useless. So we need to have some weight behind them, and the bank would establish that legitimacy. Jefferson thought that the bank would actually put the wealth of the nation in the hands of the wealthy. He's not entirely wrong with that sense because, again, who can buy stock but wealthy people? So what happens is we have these two interpretations of the Constitution. So we have what we call loose construction and strict construction. Loose construction is the idea is that the Constitution is open for debate. You can use it however you want. And so what's not forbidden is actually allowed. Hey, welcome, Bart.
Are you in a meeting? Or?
I have one student, Chloe's in here saying hi, but I'm recording right now. So, all right, sounds good. Let's see. Now I gotta get back to my page. All right. Okay. So we are back. I gotta open up my stuff again. Sorry, Mr. Barker called to talk to me really quick. So anyway, we were looking at talking about the bank program, and so loose interpretation is basically if it's not forbidden, you can do it. So that's Hamilton's perspective. If the Constitution says, "Hey, you can't do this," then then you're allowed to do it. Whereas strict construction is the idea that the Constitution is followed. If it says you can do it, you can do it. If it's not there, you are not allowed to do it. And that's Jefferson's view. So again, Jefferson and Hamilton, completely different viewpoints. So Hamilton actually wins his kind of support from Washington, which again holds that. So you get Washington's a strong supporter. The United States assumes all the debts from all the states. His tariffs and taxes are passed, and the national bank is chartered for 20 years. Again, this goes back to the trade with Madison and Jefferson over trading the national capital for these kind of votes. The political parties emerge, like we talked about. So Federalists are Hamilton supporters. They believe in that strong central government, big government, and the Democratic Republicans are those who are follow Jefferson, and they believe in a limited federal government, strong state governments. And so in today's um, world, we would call Federalists Democrats, and we would call Democratic Republicans Republicans. Uh, so again, the Federalists, you can kind of see them here: New England colonies, merchant class, landowners, loose construction. So you can do it if it doesn't say you can't do it, you can. Hamilton's economic programs, and they want a strong navy and army. Democratic Republicans, again, Republicans support the South and the frontiers. They have strict construction. So if it doesn't say you can do it, you can't do it. They want a weak central government, strong state government, and they want an agrarian economy. Again, agrarian, looking at the root word, would be agriculture. Um, and so they oppose tariffs in the National Bank. We covered the Whiskey Rebellion. The next one's going to be the French question. So Washington's first term, uh, France has a full-blown revolution where they're overthrown. Again, interesting. Bark and I talked about this on Turn Bark Time, that the French monarchy actually is overthrown because they spent too much money helping us, and that caused economic problems in France. And then during the revolution, that goes back to the cabinet battle number 2, in which we talk about what to do with France. And again, they talk about how France helped us, but Hamilton brings up the fact, he's like, well, do you want to talk to King Louis's head? Do whatever you want. I'm super dead. And so we look for it. So again, there's two types of people. There's Anglophiles and Francophiles. Anglophiles are I could have Anglophiles wrong, but that's like people who are British, pro-British, and then Francophiles, pro-French. So we look at this and we say, okay, Republicans want to honor the French-American alliance, but that's not, Federalists say the alliance was formed with the French monarchy that no longer exists. The alliance has no longer existed. They openly supported the British as they didn't want a bloody, violent revolution taking place in France. So Washington comes out after Cabinet Battle number 2, says issue a statement of neutrality. He doesn't believe the United States is strong enough to be involved in any war, especially a foreign war where we'd have to send troops across the ocean. The United States would support neither in the war, but it would remain neutral, and he urged people to remain neutral as well. One of the biggest things, I'm going to actually cut it off there for now because we're about 18 minutes in. So if you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the question bar. Remember, if you watch this video, that we have a meeting on Thursday. I believe I said it at 10 to 10:30. So I just want to check in with you guys, see how you're doing and everything like that. Okay? So have a great rest of your day, and go ahead and watch this, and then we'll do questions on Thursday.